Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Hernandez, here along with...
I'm Doug.
That's right, we're back. We're talking movies. This time, I I just bury Doug with Star Wars. There's no other way to put it. I'm sorry, Doug.
Yeah, the tidal wave rolled in, and I just battened down the hatches and rolled with it.
Yeah, I had a proud father moment with my son. He wanted to watch Star Wars, and that kicked off this whole diatribe of stuff. And of course, all the useless Star Wars trivia came out. But we talk Star Wars. We talk a little bit about Dune because, George Lucas borrowed, quote unquote, some stuff from Dune. We talk about Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire that's coming out real soon. What else did we tackle? Anything else? I think that was pretty much it.
It's Ghost. Yeah, that's pretty much those three movies were pretty much the long and short of it. So,
All right. So, yeah. Little film action for anybody out there. And if you're a Star Wars fan, let us know what you think about the original trilogy, the newer trilogy with Jar Jar, Qui-Gon, young Anakin, and young Obi-Wan. And let's face it, people were kind of divided on the newer one with Rey and Finn. So yeah, if you have any thoughts, be constructive. Send it all over. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can go check us out over there under the various different sections: games, comics, celebrities, movie, TV, wrestling. Search us. We're there. Don't worry about it. You can also check out the show over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. Make sure you check out our YouTube channel because we upload the show there as well. Let's see. Check out the Rabblecast Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast on X. And emails, rabblecast@gmail.com. Any ideas, any stories, any pictures, any feedback, more than welcome to. Anything else, sir?
no,
All right. We had a little fun. I got a little long in the story, so I apologize for anybody who gets like, fuck, enough of the Star Wars. I get it. It's about half the episode, so just be ready. But there were a few fun father moments. I'll leave it at that. That's about it. Let's get into it. Enjoy the show.
welcome back to the Rabblecast. How are you?
It's Thursday night. I'm feeling pretty good, and yeah, I mean that's about it. Nothing too crazy to call home about. What about you?
What are you gonna do? Same old things. I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of a mess today.
All right, fair enough. Uh, I had a recent proud father moment.
Oh yeah, what happened?
In the recent weeks, my son has begun showing interest in the Star Wars.
Okay,
Out of
cool.
nowhere, he's seen like the copies of the movie that hang in the bedroom, or he's seen us watch on Disney Plus. There's the Bad Batch, or the Ahsoka series, the Obi-Wan series. Like there's no secret that we're fans of Star Wars.
Okay,
I was around his same age when I was first really like sat down to watch. It might have been Empire or New Hope, or at the time it was just Star Wars because the subtitle New Hope didn't come till much later after the movie's release. And out of nowhere, he asked, I want to watch Star Wars, and I said, okay. Figured make it easier, just do it in the living room during a little family time. We sit down, have some dinner, enjoy it, and we had to go through different sittings because his attention span really isn't there. So I think we went to like the first 40, 50 minutes, maybe, probably close to an hour.
mm-hmm.
And he goes, all right, can we take a break? I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. We didn't come back to the movie for like another day or two. But
Mm-hmm.
he was holding on to all the different story points. He knew who most of the characters were. For the longest time, he had trouble retaining the name of C-3PO.
Okay.
R2 was easy enough and is his favorite character, which was mine as well in the early trilogy. And just as soon as we finished A New Hope, I asked him if he wanted to watch Empire. He goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So we sat down to watch Empire. And like I same thing. It was taking breaks, whatever the case was. We watched it in 2 sittings. But there's this moment at the end of Empire, which a lot of people enjoy as their favorite one from the original trilogy. I don't know what your take might be. But the way the story's set up and the way everything plays out, and I can't believe I have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, just in case. Spoilers. When you find out that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, I never thought I'd have that moment of, holy crap, ever again. Until my son watched it. And then he turns around and looks at me, he goes, Vader is Luke's father? I thought Vader killed his father. And I had to explain the idea of, yes, when Anakin was young, he, was strong with the Force, and eventually he had this moment of anger, which is why they say, don't give in to your hatred, don't give in to your fear. And I had to explain to him that by Anakin giving in to all that, he fell to the dark side. And in doing so, he killed Anakin himself and then became Darth Vader. And he goes, oh.
Yep, there we go.
And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I having to explain to somebody for the first time, especially with such a young mind, it was weird. Like, I've been watching Star Wars ever since I was a kid, obviously, as I mentioned. But even when I watched it, I really didn't have that aha moment like the theater crowd had back in the day. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that. It never hit me quite as hard. But when I had to explain it to my son, I was like, wow, like he's actually like putting the pieces together and asking different things. But he also has the benefit, and we're going to watch him down the line, of watching the newer trilogies so that all the other pieces can fall relatively into place from there. And I was like, okay, we'll see what's going on. But my favorite part was, I say this all because at the end, I was like, all right, let me jump ahead a little bit. I said, okay, just to let you know, there was more than one Darth. He goes, what? I was like, yeah, there's always 2 Sith Lords. There's Darth Vader and the Emperor. But before that, there was this guy. And I told him to close his eyes. I did a quick YouTube search and put it up on the TV. And I did the scene from The Phantom Menace when Darth Maul encounters Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in the spaceport. And it's the first time in the film where Darth Maul presents his lightsaber. He's holding it horizontally in one hand. One blade ignites and comes out, and all of a sudden, followed by it, the second blade ignites on the opposite side of the saber. And you're like, oh, it's a fucking bow staff. The first time you'd ever seen something other than just a hilt or sword of sorts as a lightsaber. Like that opened the door of different weapons being lightsabers. But when he saw that, and he saw the makeup and the horns, and he was, who's that? I was like, oh, that's Darth Maul. He goes, he's cool. Then his little brain clicked. He runs back to his room, and his room is my old lightsaber. The only lightsaber I've ever owned is a Darth Maul lightsaber. I bought it back when the movie came out. So if you look on the hilt, it says 1999 Playmates. And I was like, wow, this thing's fucking old. It's coming up on 25 years old at this point. And he's holding it, and I'm showing him how to, if you hold it in one hand in your wrist, and if you quickly turn your wrist or rotate your wrist, the 2 opposite blades will pop out on either side, extending and making it like battle ready. And he goes, oh, that's so cool. And then finally, the youngest one walks in, and he's like hugging himself and smiling when he sees the lightsaber. You can tell he's all excited. He's like shaking a little bit with the joy. And then I let him hold the lightsaber. He starts to hug it, and he gives me a thumbs up. I'm like, oh no, I have a little fucking toddler Sith Lord. I was like, okay, all right, this is the entry point. I think he might be a little too young to really understand what's going on, but he's holding one of Daddy's quote unquote toys from when he was a kid. So it's very interesting to see how they're reacting to it and how they're taking it in so far. I don't know. It's a weird one to see overall, because the effects and the story still hold up for the original trilogy, thankfully.
Mhm.
I mean, if you want, you can nitpick at certain things here and there, especially when you watch it on a big screen nowadays. But I was surprised that it still captured their imagination. It still made them laugh at certain points. The one scene where Leia's in the detention center on the Death Star, and Luke and Han and Chewie are all trying to figure out like how they're going to get in, and Han saying, as soon as we get the damn tractor beam down, I'm out of here. And Luke's trying to convince him, like, stick around. You can help the rebellion. You can be a hero. He goes, yeah, that's for somebody else, kid, not for me. And then the moment where Luke goes, she's rich. How rich? And that moment actually made my son laugh. I was like, okay, the writing still holds up in certain regards. I get it. Cool. Nice thing to see here and there. And it's so weird to have like that little time capsule of Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher, and just looking at them when they're still so young, like they're frozen in time in those movies, and it's just so odd to watch. But George Lucas made something that spans generations, and the next one right there is all excited about it. And when I told him, like, oh, there's a lot more movies, there's a lot more stories. He goes, oh, really? I'm like, oh yeah. So I don't know how it's going to go moving forward. He wants to watch Return of the Jedi tomorrow night, which I was all for. There's a lot more creature work going in there. Jabba's palace, the Ewoks, the Sarlacc pit, and everything else. So I was like, all right, I guess we're going down this road. I guess he's going to start getting all excited and seeing Jedis and Siths and see how that all works out. And I'm kind of curious to see how he's going to react to the newer trilogies. In particular, the ones with, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Jar Jar Binks. Because there has been a resurgence in the popularity of Jar Jar Binks. Because for our generation who watched the movies, like, oh my God, it's fucking stupid. That's a kid's character in a Star Wars movie.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of forget that Star Wars is a kid's movie to a certain extent. It was made to capture the imagination of the fans. So as the younger generation has been growing up with that trilogy at their fingertips, because streaming on demand or whatever the case, you can download the film to your phone or tablet and watch it. And Jar Jar Binks has actually gotten popular again.
Really?
Yeah. There's a little
That's
documentary. I know, Misa too. I know. Everybody was trying to do Jar Jar back in the day. It sounded stupid then. It sounds stupid now. But the younger generation appreciates Jar Jar apparently, and they don't see him as much of a joke as we did back in the day. So I'll gauge that one, and we'll get to it and see what happens. But I was also explaining to him the newer trilogy with Rey and with Finn and everything else, and explaining that there's going to be another movie being made with Rey Skywalker at this point. So we have to wait and see how that one's going to play out, because we know that the last three movies were, a mixed bag of reactions and story when it came to everything. I still say that it probably would have been a better idea just to hire J.J. Abrams and say, hey, look, fucker, you make good stuff. We're going to make you do all three of these. No. I just want to be a fan. I want to sit in the audience. I want to see the next Star Wars on the big screen. I don't want to be behind the camera. Back up the huge truck of money. Okay, I'll do the first one. Okay. Then Rian Johnson comes in and does, The Last Jedi? And, again, mixed reactions. He took liberties with the story. Then later on, like, JJ, we need you to come back. No. I want to watch how the whole thing finishes, out in the big screen. I want to be in the seats. I want to watch it like everybody else. I already made one. No, thank you for the opportunity, but I'll take my seat in the audience. Here come two trucks full of money. Okay, fuck, I'll do this the third one. It's, if you had one vision for all three, kind of like the original trilogy, well, and I should say the newer trilogy with young Anakin and Qui-Gon and Padme. Lucas was behind all six. I don't think he directed the first three. I think there were at least one or two different directors between New Hope to Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
But, he worked on Phantom Menace, Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith. And then when it came to the final three, obviously Disney had stepped in and bought out Lucas. So much so that his grandkids probably will never have to work a day in their lives. It got you different results than was expected. This is also around the time period where Disney's like, we got this property that's super popular. You can make a film, it'll make money around the world. The merchandising alone is going to be ridiculous. But how do we put this story together? We have an outline from George Lucas. Yeah, we're not going to follow that. Meanwhile, George Lucas is in the corner seething. You're not going to follow my fucking outline. Fuck you. I want to sell it to you anyway.
Fuck him. He needs to go count his. How much did he get paid? $1 billion or something?
Something ridiculous. The amount of money they paid for the franchise is insane. And yes, he can get pissed off all he wants. He can consult all he wants. But long story short, he sold it. It's no longer his. Yes, he has a hand in it. Yes, he's the father of Star Wars. He birthed it into the film world, even though he pretty much stole ideas from Dune and twisted it into his own little fantasy world. But, it is what it is at this point. Could they have gotten better? Because, everybody's like, it's funny, when you talk about the fandom for Star Wars, it's either they love George Lucas or fuck George Lucas, stop messing with your films, just leave it alone. We love it the way it was. Stop adding shit to it. Greedo and Han, who shot first? That all nonsense. Or the bonus scenes that were added in the re-release when it was put back in theaters because they had access to CGI at that point. Screw you, George Lucas, for doing the pod race scene and for introducing Jar Jar Binks and the ridiculous versions of Anakin that we had to deal with. What the fuck were you thinking? Not to mention the Frankenstein Darth Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith, which is going, no.
Mm-hmm.
But now that Disney has made their three, now there's a segment of the fandom that says, George Lucas could have made a better follow-up trilogy. If you had followed his notes, it would have been a lot better. Fuck off. You were just complaining about him touching his original films and introducing these ridiculous characters. You obviously didn't like what George Lucas did. You obviously didn't like what Disney did. Guess what? You're never going to be happy with a Star Wars film. And that's the fandom. I don't know. It's a convoluted story when you go through it. Yes, there are people who enjoy it for what it is and defend it passionately. I get it. One of my favorite movies is still Rogue One. The story of how they got the plans for the Death Star that led to its ultimate destruction in the first film. Again, spoilers. But that one was a more of a realistic and gritty story because you knew the characters that were going into it were essentially screwed from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, oh, okay, let's see how this plays out. And there's no happy ending, even though the film itself had a troubled shooting schedule and reshoots and everything else. But introducing my son and sons, because the little one was watching too, to the world of Star Wars now is just, I don't know how it's going to turn out overall. He's young enough that he can't really form an opinion to say, I really didn't like that. I don't ever want to watch it again. Why the fuck did you make me watch that?
Mm-hmm.
He's going to enjoy it. There's lightsabers, there's battles, there's X-Wings, there's TIE fighters, there's Darth Vader, there's going to be Darth Maul. There's going to be Kylo Ren eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, he's enjoying the first two films with a third one on deck. So I'm like, okay. And then he asked me, he goes, wait, this is episode 4? I was like, yes. What happened? I'm like, the other episodes came out at a later time. At the end of the 90s, they released episode 1, 2, and 3. And then later on down the line, they did 7, 8, 9. He goes, oh, with a look of confusion still on his face. And I said, don't worry about it. We're going to watch them in the order that they were released in the theaters. And I'll fill in any of the gaps that fall into place. He goes, oh, okay. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. What was your take on Star Wars? Were you a fan? Were you with it?
The first couple when I was the original three when I was a kid, I was fine with it. It was nothing really that blew my mind, but I'd watch them if they were on TV. Do you remember when they were re-released back in like the late like 97 ish?
Absolutely. My brother took me to the theater to watch them in midnight releases.
Okay, that was about the point where the fan base really started to irk me. And
Okay.
like I was very indifferent towards them, but at that point people were so like losing their minds about it that I was like, okay, everyone calm the fuck down. It's we got 20-year-old movies. It's I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. Um it's funny, I've seen exactly one Star Wars film in theaters. I went to go see Phantom Menace in theaters in
Oof.
May or June of '99,
Okay.
and yeah, it was so. Oh, I remember sitting there being like, God, this is a piece of shit. Like outside of the stuff with Darth Maul being pretty sweet because the fight scenes were. I remember actually looking up like some of the documentaries about the choreography of the fight scenes between the two Jedi and Darth Maul,
Uh-huh.
and like they worked their asses off, like to the point where like they were using these like I think like aluminum rods to kind of stand in for like the lightsabers, and they would have to swap them out for fresh ones periodically because they would get so dented and warped and banged up from like how hard they were swinging at each other with. Because Ray Park is actually like a well-trained martial artist from what I recall,
Yes.
so he put together a lot of it and nursed Liam Neeson and bloody hell, I'm blanking on the other fellow's name.
Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor, thank you very much. And helped put together everything and kind of coached them through it, and they all worked together with the other choreographers. And yeah, you came up with something really good, but so much of the story just fucking sucked. Like I'm sorry, like I just they're like, oh, you got midichlorians in your blood, and that's why you can do this. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, you dumb bastard? And then all the characters were very annoying. Yeah, the Jar Jar Binks stuff. I was like, this is just obnoxious. The CGI, I didn't even really think looked all that great. It was that definitely of an era of like we think CGI is amazing, but it's like, buddy, it's not that. We're not quite home yet with this. It still looks like shitty.
Yeah, you should have
Um,
stuck to the practical models.
yeah, one of the ones that really that just seemed really bizarre to me was when they were doing that whole pod racing thing, and they had the announcers that were trying to do like I'm not sure if they were trying to do like a Howard Cosell thing or what the fuck was going on.
Yep.
But then I just remember leaving the theater and just thinking to myself, I was like, that was oof, that was not good. So, and then I mean, we know what happened then in 2000 in 2002, and I think 2005 was when the next one came out. And yeah, I just was not feeling any of them to the point where any fleeting interest I had in the series was long dead at that point. I will say this, however, in recent years, I saw Rogue One, um, a Star Wars story, I believe it's referred to.
Yes.
I will say that was actually not bad. I mean, once it got part past like the Star Wars part, and it's like, oh, this is basically just kind of like a military espionage film.
Yep. Pretty much.
Yeah, that was. I remember watching it and thinking to myself, I was like, this is not terrible. Like, it's not like my favorite movie in the world, but this was kind of cool. So, but yeah, I mean, other than that, like all the new stuff, like what is it called?
Ahsoka.
Ahsoka. Okay, that kind of thing, and the Mandalorian and all of that. Yeah, I do not give a shit.
Okay.
Like, I mean, like, and I don't rag on anybody for liking them. If it's your fandom and you like Star Wars, cool, enjoy, go, fucking party. But not my thing.
So, a few things for Phantom Menace. I can't remember the name of the individual who actually played Jar Jar. But the actor who ultimately played him, George Lucas, took him to a Michael Jackson concert back in the day.
Okay.
And when they got to when they got to the concert, they go backstage, and when they're talking to Michael, George Lucas introduces the actor as, "Oh, Michael, I'd like you to meet such and such. He's going to be playing Jar Jar Binks." And then Michael Jackson just got this like sullen look on his face because apparently he was lobbying really hard to play Jar Jar.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh wow.
there is an alternate world where Michael Jackson was Jar Jar Binks,
and
And
that helped him conquer his drug problem, and he's still alive.
possibly. But oh god, I can't remember his name now. The actor has long since been redeemed because, like I said, the popularity of Jar Jar is coming back, and they've also cast him in some of the different series. I think it was the Obi-Wan series where he has been recast as a Jedi, so
Hmm.
he has a chance to go out there and not be silly Jar Jar, but actually play different characters at this point. Let's see what else was there. The pod race scene was ultimately made for George Lucas's son. In
Okay.
some of the scenes, it's actually excuse me, it's actually George Lucas's son in the pod racer. So for like the wide shots, I guess you can say,
Hmm.
and that's really the only reason the pod race scene exists. He goes, "Oh, I can make a Star Wars film again, and I'm going to do this for my kids." Again, it's a kids film. The first one, especially with young Anakin, which we never see again because later on Hayden Christensen takes over the role for the next two films, and then going on forward, that was the whole reason for the pod race scene. It was just an overblown attraction or ride for his kids that made it into the movie. And hey, look, I did this because I have all this money. That's about it.
Ah, yeesh.
And then you're right. Once Phantom Menace came out, it had mixed reactions because people were expecting different aspects of the story. Back in A New Hope, they talk about how Anakin, or Luke's father, because they seldom refer to him as Anakin, he was like one of the best pilots in the galaxy. You're like, oh,
Hmm.
Anakin Skywalker, he was a fucking badass. He must have been out there with like Rogue Squadron and everybody else, or whatever came before Rogue Squadron. He's just an awesome pilot, awesome Jedi. Like you were expecting this awesome dude when you first meet him. When you first meet him as a child,
Hmm.
with mommy problems because he leaves, Tatooine and leaves his mom to go away with two Jedi and a couple of droids. That didn't line up with what people were expecting. I don't know if Lucas had those quote unquote notes or outline for those three movies. It felt like he like rewrote a bunch of stuff and just did it on the fly for the most part.
Hmm.
But what we pieced together from the original trilogy to what we were shown in the newer trilogy didn't meet everybody's expectations. And because of that, that's again where the fandom got. Either they loved the movies, they thought were great because they can share them with their kids or they can share them with their friends, whatever the case is. And then there's the other segment of the fans like, well, fuck that. That's not what I wanted. This is a fucking kids movie. Again, it is.
Hmm.
Look at the pod race scene. This is, if you were expecting like lightsabers, sex, and violence, that's a pretty cool name for an album. Not in this case. Like we didn't get serious Star Wars probably until I'd probably say Rogue One was the first attempt at it.
Uh-huh.
And then if you want for a more serious take on it, the series Andor, which actually involves Gabriel Luna, the one character from Rogue One, the male spy
Okay.
character.
Okay.
Cassian, that's I'm trying to remember his name. And it shows how he gets involved with the rebellion. He essentially falls in and is just stuck at this point trying to fight against the Empire. And his bad luck essentially just rolls on in the series. The series is pretty damn good. In fact, the first Star Wars series that starts in a brothel. You're like, oh, okay. But I didn't know they had these in Star Wars.
Hmm.
But if you ever get a chance, I would say probably watch the first two episodes of Andor, see if you like it. It's done pretty well. I'm trying to remember who actually directed them or wrote them. It was a prominent individual, but it it works. Like as far as story, it's well done. It's again another spy espionage in the world of Star Wars. It just happens to take place there, and the way it all plays out, you're like, okay, I can see how this goes. This is they show the sparks of the rebellion for the first time going against the Empire in this
Hmm.
series, and then from there it rolls in because again, that Cassian eventually ends up in Rogue One, and his fate in Rogue One at that point. So it's like, okay, this character has a limited span. Let's enjoy what we get for the time being. I do believe they're coming back with a second season, and the writer said that's it. After season 2, we're done. we're not going any further with that. His end in season 2 will line up with the events of Rogue One, and then from there he goes on to his end. I'm like, ooh, damn, okay. So for that, anybody out there who wants something a little bit different, not all the kiddie stuff and not all, Jedi and Sith and everything else. There are a few Jedi moments here and there in Andor, but nothing egregious, nothing that takes over. So you see how it all plays out and it all comes together. And they do a really good job of weaving it into the rest of the tapestry that is the Star Wars universe at this point. So, But yeah, it's weird to see how like the first movie kind of split the fan base in a way. Because I remember everybody getting upset about Jar Jar. I remember everybody getting upset that Obi-Wan didn't have that much of a role in it. I feel bad for the guy who played Count Dooku. Why the fuck am I... Christopher
Lee?
Thank you, yes. I was going to say...
Oh, yeah, I forgot he was... I forgot he was in the second... what was that? Attack of the Clones?
Clone Wars. Yeah. And,
no, I think Clone Wars was the cartoon.
Yes, you were correct. Thank you.
Okay.
It's weird, and especially if you know Christopher Lee's background, military guy, actor, Hammer Films, Lord of the Rings, and a bunch of other credits to his name and his career. And then he ends up playing Count Dooku, which on film, sadly, didn't get enough time to really flesh the character out. Don't get me wrong, It's Christopher Lee, so when you see him, he commands the screen, when he's doing his thing. But I just wish there was more of him. Like Darth Vader got 3 movies to just be a badass. Like everybody feared Vader from the first scene. You're like, holy shit. Dooku, on the other hand, if you follow the storyline for him, he was Yoda's apprentice, so Master Yoda taught him. And in the animated series, I don't know if it was Clone Wars or other, but they actually flesh out that storyline where he was, training to become a Jedi, very prominent student, showing, good working with the Force. But then it got to a certain point where he goes, oh shit, am I fighting on the right side? And has that moment of doubt, and then realizes, no, fuck this, and fuck the Jedi way, and ends up turning to the dark side. So he goes from whatever his former name was, switching over to Count Dooku. I'm like, oh shit, okay, that's a nice little change of events there. So it was fun stuff, but like a lot of the other characters, they felt like they were hot shotted onto the screen, like General Grievous, the robot with the multiple arms.
Okay.
I think you saw him in Attack of the Clones. Same thing. Like at one point, Obi-Wan gets sent on a mission to stop him because he's at some base. Obi-Wan gets there. They have a brief battle. You see how badass the character is, but you barely see him again. And then when you do see him, he's in Revenge of the Sith, and they dispatch him fairly easily. His character was cool because when he fights, he pulls out not only one lightsaber, he's got 4 arms. So he pulls out 4 lightsabers. You're like, well, what the fuck? You're not playing by the rules here. Turns out every time he defeats a Jedi, he collects their lightsaber. Hence why he has multiple, because now he's fighting you with a Jedi's lightsaber along with his own. You're like, oh, okay. This is like he's more robot than man at this point, and he's fully given himself over to the dark side, and he's just going mechanical on you. I'm like, okay. This could have been more story that could have been fleshed out in the movies, given more time if we got away from the romance story and some of the other nonsense. But again, it's Star Wars. It's meant for a certain audience. And then from there, if you want, you can get the novels, the books, whatever other online article fills in the gaps. A good example was recently, because we had just watched Empire. I remember back in the day, around the time that they were doing the re-release of the movies in the theaters, as you mentioned, they were trying to fill the gap between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So they concocted this one story called Shadows of the Empire. And it's the story of Luke, Leia, Lando, and Chewie trying to hunt down Boba Fett and Han before they get to Jabba the Hutt. So it's a nice little space filler in between. I remember when the books came out, like coloring books, the figures, and all the merchandising that was around it, leading up to the re-release of the films. I found it online on Audible. You can download the book. It's like a 3-hour audiobook. I figured, what the hell, why not? I'm in the Star Wars mood at this point, so let's give it a go. And ultimately, if I had read this back when it came out in the 90s, I probably would have thought, oh, great, this is an awesome, like, space filler in between those two films. By the time I started the book and the time I finished the book while I was at work, I was like, all right, that was a fun story, but not exactly what I was hoping for. They introduced a new character, a gangster of sorts by the name of Prince Zizor. He's like some kind of like reptilian character who emits pheromones so he can manipulate people's feelings and reactions. And his goal is to become the Emperor's right hand. So he ultimately wants to take out Darth Vader. The chase between Zizor wanting to, displace Vader, but then finding out that Vader is hunting Skywalker. Why is he hunting Skywalker? Oh, Skywalker is Anakin's son. He knows that Anakin is or was young Darth Vader. So he goes, oh, easy. If I want to get rid of Vader, I'll get rid of his son. And when he comes calling, I'll take him out. Obviously, it doesn't go to plan. The good guys win in the end. And then they go on to Return of the Jedi, which is their hunt for Han Solo, who's still frozen in carbonite. The one notable thing about this is that they introduced a character by the name of Dash Rendar. If you remember, on Nintendo 64, they had a game called Shadows of the Empire. It was like a Doom-esque type of first-person shooter. So you're going up against the Empire, you're having all these different battles, and he essentially was the short-term replacement for Han Solo. Because anytime you read any of his dialogue, or if you listen to the audiobook, or you play the game, anything that Han would have said, that same feeling, that same like roguish character, is Dash. You're like, oh, okay, I see. This is just a temporary thing, whatever the case was. But at the same time, it was another marketing scheme just to reignite the excitement for Star Wars. I was like, okay, Shadows of the Empire, it's fun and everything else. There's other storylines where apparently they like try cloning Luke, and Luke turns evil. He like dips into the dark side, and there's a bunch of other stuff. The novelizations, unfortunately, have now been disavowed as far as canon ever since Disney bought it. So for all those people who have those books and go, oh, this was such a great storyline, the Jedi Academy, the Jedi Temple, the Night Hammer, and all this other stuff, you can still hold on to them because they're still they're cherry picking out of those stories for the upcoming series. Ahsoka was one of them, actually, where they reintroduced the character of Admiral Thrawn. That was one of the characters that showed up in that book series. It was Heir to the Empire. And I was like, okay, there's still aspects that can still be brought into the new canon that is the Disney Star Wars. But a lot of the fans, once again, got upset because all those storylines that were canon, rather than Kylo Ren, Han and Leia had twins, a boy and a girl, which were also Force capable. Luke eventually builds a Jedi Temple, actually goes on to teach a new generation, and falls in love with another woman who I do believe at one point turns to the dark side, just like that whole storyline with Mara Jade. And there's just a bunch of different things that were laid out and spelled out in all these different novels, but then once Disney came calling and backed up their money truck, and that all went away. Until they say, we want to grab that character, we want to grab this storyline, we want to use this and that. So who knows what's going to come for the future for Star Wars. But as we mentioned in the past, Disney bought it with the intent to print money. So you're not going to buy an IP and not have a return on your investment. They're definitely going to keep making films. They're definitely going to keep making more series. There will definitely be more merchandise down the line. So Star Wars is never going to get away that easily. My kids will probably have a Star Wars trilogy to watch when they get older. So we'll see what happens. But, oh wow, I didn't expect this to turn into a whole Star Wars. But hey, like I said, proud father moment when he came up to me and goes, I want to watch Star Wars. I'm like, okay. Something I didn't realize, the first two movies at least are about 2 hours long, which back then when they first came out is kind of a long movie for the 70s and 80s.
Hmm.
So I was like, wow, I didn't realize like they were pulling the taffy on this one. They they were trying to make sure that moviegoers got an experience back then. But again, the difference between using practical effects to CGI and green screens, you can definitely see the difference between the old trilogy and the newer trilogy. You're just like, okay, take your pick, whichever one you like more. But I was like, it works. Overall, the magic's still there. Whether it's industrial light and magic, the effects house, whatever the case was, or just the love of the characters. Like this is just fucking useless trivia that exists in my head. The X-wing scene in the swamp of Dagobah when he goes to meet up with Yoda in Empire. At one point, Jen goes, I can't remember. Did they use a miniature for this, or is this something? Actually, I do believe this is either Spielberg or George Lucas's own pool. They just dressed it up to look like a swamp.
Mm.
And they filmed there. So they made this like large version of the X-Wing. I don't know if it was to scale, because that's a big sumbitch, but at the very least they had submerged an X-Wing in his pool so they can try to raise it out and show Yoda using the Force. And she goes, okay. The other fun part is Luke is traversing the planet of Dagobah during his training with Yoda. You see various reptiles running around. So you see a snake, you see an iguana, and I'm pretty sure they're the same snake and iguana in every scene. They just spread them out. But at one point, Luke is going into like this one little cavern, and he's dipping down. There's an iguana like running away from him. And I look at Jen. I'm like, "Did you see that?" She goes, "What?" I'm like, "Space iguana," because they didn't do anything to it. It's just an iguana. there was no change to it. They didn't try putting makeup on him. They didn't try to put in like little extra horns on him or anything. They're like, oh, yeah, those exist in space too, in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago. But those are the things that you kind of have like to accept in a movie, and especially in a galaxy like this, I guess you can say. There's only so much world building where you can do where everything you see is a different character. Going back to A New Hope, when they do the scene where they go into the cantina. I do believe it was Rick Baker, who was a big special effects artist back in the day, still is, was going around celebrating, I guess, his retirement or doing something. I can't remember. He was like releasing a big book collection of all the different makeup effects they used to do. When they did the cantina scene, you have all these different creatures and aliens, but if you go back, it's essentially whatever makeup or masks they had in the warehouse. And it's like, yeah, just put that on that guy, or put on this guy, or why does this guy have like a static looking like weird like bug face? That's what we had in the warehouse at the time. We're just throw it all together. It makes sense in a Star Wars film. Otherwise, it's just out of place and just wouldn't look right anywhere else. But work with what you got, and then from there it becomes an iconic scene because the hive of scum and villainy that you see of all the different characters, and the walrus face guy who comes in and gets in Luke's face, and then the little scuffle that happens when Obi-Wan slices his arm off with the lightsaber. He's like, oh shit, ruffians. But there you go. Again, all this shit stuck in my head. It has been since I was like 8 years old. Rarely do I have a chance to really talk about it or unleash it in a regular setting. So here I am just like vomiting up Star Wars info left and right. So I apologize. But, all right. Is there anything else going on in the world? How about you? Anything you've come across that's not Star Wars?
No, I've kind of been not really paying much attention to anything else going on since it's just, I got other stuff I've been trying to figure out. So I don't know what's going on in the world of pop culture these days, to be perfectly honest with you, man.
All right. Well, there's a bunch of stuff coming out. I know we talked about a couple different animated series coming back. The X-Men cartoon, Invincible's coming. There was, that's what it was. If I can find there it is. It's on the screen in the background, and I gotta mute it real quick. Shudder, the Shudder YouTube channel, released the first trailer for Late Night with the Devil. It stars David Smolchin. He was in The Last Voyage of the Demeter. He was Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad.
Hmm.
and one of his prominent roles was in The Dark Knight Rises, or was it no Dark Knight? The
Dark
one
Knight.
Dark. Thank you. Where he plays the one follower of the Joker that Harvey Dent interrogates to find out where Rachel is. But this is his first time, I guess, being front and center or being the main character, and like they do like a 70s talk show late night, and it deals with Satan worshiping and some like weird shit that happens during the segment. So I was like, oh, okay, they've been talking about this for a while. It made its rounds around the film festivals, and now here it is about to come out. So I'm looking forward to it. A lot of people say it's good. If it's that kind of thing for you, you'll enjoy it. But if not, just be forewarned, because it might not be as entertaining if you're not a fan of the films. So the one scene in the background right now, he's holding up a book that says "Conversations with the Devil," and they're having like all these different segments behind the scenes where they're talking about, the show, the ratings and all this other stuff. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah, yeah.
I know Dune 2 came out recently, and I
Mhm.
think besides Dune, the movie itself, I think more people were excited over the popcorn bucket. Did you see this?
Oh, yeah. A friend of the show, Holly Ween, showed me a picture of it. It's fucking ridiculous looking.
So, for anybody who's not catching on and hasn't seen this, first off, go look it up. Dune popcorn bucket. It's essentially just, a regular bucket of popcorn with a little add-on up top of a sandworm. And the sandworm, since we're referring to Star Wars, if you remember the Sarlacc pit from Star Wars, that's essentially what a sandworm looks like in Dune. But the old cliched story of popcorn buckets, if you're on a date in the movie theater, the urban legend is cut a hole in the bottom of the bucket, stick your wang through there, and when that girl that you're with goes to stick her hand in there for some nice hot buttered popcorn, she's going to get a little bit more. So, of course, the sandworm bucket just brought in more, like, what the fuck are we doing? What's happening? Who's going to be the first person to fuck the sandworm popcorn bucket? So I think that got more press than most of the film itself, to be honest. Because, again,
Mhm.
people are fucking deviants. So, but I was supposed to go check that one out. Did you watch the first Dune movie?
No, I've never seen any Dune movie.
Really? Okay, fair enough.
I'm not. It isn't quite my cup of tea in a lot of cases, and I never had any interest in the David. What was it? David Lynch did one back in the '80s, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, I no interest in that. No interest in the new one, to be perfectly honest with you.
So the funny thing, and this is kind of fortuitous mentioning both in the same show, if you look at Dune, you can see where George Lucas stole or borrowed his ideas from.
Hmm.
Overall, I can't remember what they refer to it as, but the main character in Dune has this ability that he can tap into, so that he can actually like play with people's minds and make them do things that they don't want to do, kind of like the Force.
Hmm.
They have these, I think they're called vibro blades or something like that. There's a training scene where they're going through, and yeah, I can't remember his name now. Shit. The kid who played the new Willy Wonka. I know it's a bad example.
Timothy Chalamet.
Thank you. Okay, yes. So he's going against Josh Brolin in this little training segment, and they have like these weird like shields, and you can see like when there's contact with the shield, it turns blue, but when there's contact with like one of the vibro blades, it turns red to show like it's breaching the shield or breaking through the shield. So they have all these different weird things. The family that goes to the planet of Dune goes there because they're assuming control of this one facility, and the facility harvests spice. It like all these, like the setting, the idea of spice being used as a commodity, this weird ability that's force like, that he's born into, like all this stuff, like you can see where George Lucas is like, oh, I really like that idea. I'm gonna make my own little space opera, and then he goes and does something a little bit more sci-fi and crazy, but more mainstream at the very least, because Dune didn't really catch on as big as Star Wars. Like you said, in the '80s they made the one, and then for the longest time it just sat quiet. I think that's the one that the singer Sting was in, right? The one in the '80s.
If you say so.
I believe so. I don't remember off the top of my head.
The only one I know Kyle MacLachlan from Twin Peaks was in it. Other than that, I don't really know too much about it.
Okay. Again, David DeSmulchin plays one of the characters for the Arrakis family. And Dave Bautista is another one that pops up. He has, I'm not going to say like he has a weird look. I mean, he's got a shaved head, which is normal for him, but the armor and the makeup that they put him in he looks pretty cool. But you can clearly see it's Dave Bautista. Timothy Chalamet, you have him. He's pretty much the main character because he's like the Luke Skywalker analog in this case. You also have Jason Momoa, who's playing, I believe, is his brother. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then you have like this other factions and other groups. And from what I'm told, like the second movie, like really like brings the story in and gives you more action, because the first one is more of just the setup. And if you want, you can go check out the Dune books. I never have. I waited because the first Dune movie came out day and date on HBO. Came out day and date on HBO Max. So while everybody's like, oh, you can either go to the theater while COVID's happening, or you can just stay home and watch Dune. And I watched Dune a few times. You'd think I'd retain more facts from it, but it's kind of slipping right now. But the second film coming out, I do believe they say there's another storyline they want to tell if they can. At least Denis Villeneuve, the director, is like his lifelong project that he wanted to do the Dune movies. So the fact that they got made and they're doing pretty well from what I understand, hopefully it'll be a big win for him in his portfolio or his resume, whatever you want to refer to it as, because it's not an easy thing to take that kind of a film and say, how do we reimagine this? How do we update this for modern audiences? So at the very least, that worked out. And then you've got the popcorn bucket. So
well, there you go.
Yeah, it's funny how reductive things can get. Like somebody will try their damnedest to go out there and have all this stuff, and all of a sudden somebody just goes, oh, we can just make this into a sex joke. And everybody's like, oh yeah, you can do that too. So whatever the case.
Welcome to life in the internet. I don't know.
Yeah. What else is coming out this month? I believe the new Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is coming out.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that. I think it is.
Yeah, and you've got the original Ghostbusters, the remaining Ghostbusters coming back, the kids from the last Ghostbusters movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife, and then you also have returning as Paul Rudd, Patton Oswalt, and a few other characters are showing up as well, and they're being kind of positioned as the newer class of Ghostbusters. Not to say they're replacing the veterans, but like the old guys can't keep putting on the proton packs all the time because they're the old guys. And I don't think Bill Murray wants to keep doing these movies anyway. But the fact that he's coming back for this one is kind of impressive to begin with. But,
well, it's interesting because of what is it called? Frozen Empire, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that Frozen Empire. Do you know what this year is the 40th anniversary of the original Ghostbusters?
Is it?
Yeah, it came out in '84.
I thought it was 85.
No, it was '84.
Oh shit! Okay.
In fact, I think it was like a summer. I think it was a summer release.
I'm looking right now. For anybody who wants, you can go and check out on Netflix the movies that made us. They have an entire episode on the making of Ghostbusters and all the nonsense and legal drama they went through with the movie name, because they were going to make it Ghostbusters, but then they were trying to call it something else at one point, and they were actually filming back-to-back scenes with the Ghostbusters name and then whatever other name they were trying to like put in place. It's this whole weird story back and forth, but at the very least it fills in the gap for a lot of the weird shit that happened while they were making the film.
Hmm.
And it was also so Afterlife was cool because not only was it Jason Reitman and Ivan Reitman who directed the original Ghostbusters, they helped make that come to life when Jason Reitman showed, I think it was like teaser footage at one of the conventions of the Ecto One in some like garage, just like with a tarp over it. I'm like, oh shit, shit's gonna go down. Since the first, I shouldn't say for, since Ghostbusters Afterlife, Ivan Reitman has unfortunately passed away, as has Harold Ramis, who played Egon. So this will be the first movie without Ivan Reitman, unfortunately. And since we already have the relatives of Egon, the kids from Afterlife, now it just the story once again just goes from there. Kumail Nanjiani is also in the film,
Hmm. Yes, he is.
so he's still overcoming his his trauma from being in the Eternals for Marvel, apparently. But hey, he still works, so why not? Yeah, I'm watching it right now in the background. They show the character. Any film that you can pull off the one song, "Cruel Summer." Are you familiar with
Hmm.
it?
Yeah, the old Bananarama song.
Yeah, exactly. When that opening, beat comes in, and all of a sudden they show everybody on the beach, and all of a sudden like the wave of ice is coming towards them, and all of these shards of ice are sticking out of the sand. I'm like, all right, I'm in. Like, this looks exciting already. And then the new gear, the proton packs, and the little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men are coming back again. So silly shit all around, but it looks like it has the same magic. We'll see how it plays out. I'm an easy mark when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I enjoyed the female roster of Ghostbusters, even though that's by many it's just considered like a waste of time. I thought it was fun.
Oh, I have thoughts on that movie.
I remember we watched the trailer for it at one point, back in the day when it was first coming out. Look, I'm not here to say it's a good rendition of the Ghostbusters. I enjoyed it because I just accepted it, at face value. If you want to sit there and pick it apart, you absolutely can. So it was what it was. They were hoping to get
Oh,
more life out of that version of the Ghostbusters, but if anything, what was it, Melissa McCarthy and I can't remember the other girl now.
Kristen Wiig.
Thank you. And was it Paul Feig, who was the director?
Yeah, he was the guy who did duty on that one.
Yep. If nothing else, they proved that there was still demand for a Ghostbusters story or movie, and that
Hmm.
kind of like gave the Reitman family like the kick in the butt to say, hey, look, if somebody's going to do it, it might as well be the guys who started the first one. So that birthed Afterlife in a weird way.
Hmm.
And now we give a continuation because Hollywood loves sequels. So why not? If you're
Hmm.
going to make something, you might as well make 2 or 3 down the line and hope that they have just as much as far as return on investment. So, and we'll see what happens. More
My
stuff.
biggest complaint with that movie is it's not that Melissa McCarthy is not funny. She's very funny. I've seen her in a bunch of stuff. Well, I thought she was hilarious, and the same thing with I like Kristen Wiig. The blonde haired woman who was the analog for Egon in a way, who I'm blanking on her name. Um, she's like a Saturday Night Live cast member. God, I feel like an idiot, but
Was it
whatever. Who cares?
McKinnon?
Yeah, Kate McKinnon. Thank you.
There we go.
She got the best lines.
Yes.
Um, Whoever wrote that script, I would love to ask them what the fuck their problem is. Um, but yeah, I'm watching these comedians, and like that was the first time I ever saw Leslie Jones. She's pretty funny too. I'm watching all of them, and I was like, yeah, they are breaking their backs trying to get these unfunny fucking jokes to work. And I'm just like, oh god, I feel so bad for all of you because this is. It was a little. They were the reason the first one works is they kind of just hit that sweet spot blending some comedy, some action, and some horror together. And this one was just like, oh, we're just going to be silly for the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, this is not the trick. And the other thing that kind of irked me about it is you can you can put it in the same universe. You don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, all you needed was that, like, kind of like how in um, Afterlife they talked about it's like oh yeah, you don't remember this? And they pulled up like, and Paul Rudd pulls up a YouTube video and shows them it's like, oh yeah, this is what happened in 1984 in New York City. You could totally just like make reference and then just like don't even bring anything else up about it. Just be like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, remember when this all happened like 30 something years ago? That was pretty crazy, but yeah, what are we doing now? And but it was, yeah, I mean, like it was just so many directions that it just didn't work, unfortunately. Yeah, it bummed me out too because I remember in 2016, like I was Ghostbusters, and I was actually thinking about this the other day. Ghostbusters was one of the first movies I really fell in love with as a kid because it had horror, it was funny, it was cool. It was the movie I watched and I was like, man, New York City looks like the coolest place in the world ever. Um, but yeah, like we got that, and then Ghostbusters 2, which I also love because that was a little bit more kid oriented, it felt like. And of course, I was like 10 years old when that one came out in 1990, I believe it was. Um, and then even after that, it seemed like every couple of years after that, through the 90s and into the 2000s, you'd hear like a blurb. It's like, oh, there might be working on a new Ghostbusters movie. And I was always like, oh, fucking sweet. We need this so bad.
Hmm.
And yeah, and of course, then that would just go away, and then you would hear nothing about it again for like another 3 or 4 years. And so I remember the first glimmer we got was in 2009. They made a really fun video game for I think like Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3,
Yes.
and it was a really fucking fun video game. It had a lot of it was. I remember playing through it like 3 or 4 times. I enjoyed it so much.
Funny thing
So
for
and
that one,
yeah,
that was intended to be a continuation of the storyline. So after two, again, you can make references like you were saying for Afterlife with the original.
hmm
But the game makers were contacting everybody, and once they got everybody on board that they could at the time, they reached out to Sigourney Weaver. And she was going to reprise the role of Dana. And
hmm
when she got the call, initially she thought it was some kind of like fan project, and she said thanks but no thanks.
hmm
Only to realize after the fact that it was actually a project, an official project, and Bill Murray and everybody else was signed on. And she was like, "Why didn't you fucking guys tell me?" So she would have come back, but they had to change the storyline because she didn't come back. Alyssa Milano played the museum curator. Otherwise, it would have been Dana in a certain function.
Oh, okay, I never knew that.
Yeah. So because they didn't double check, and I think Sigourney Weaver's had that problem a few times where when she's attached to a project, they reach out to her and she's not entirely sure. So I think that same thing happened with Aliens because they were writing the script and everything else, and they were like, "We don't want to bring back Sigourney Weaver. We want somebody else. Let's get a male character." And James Cameron's like, "No, you need Ripley. You can't have Aliens without Ripley. Like,
hmm
what the fuck?" And then eventually she was contacted and she goes, "Oh yeah, no, I'll do it again. Let's go for it." But
Yeah.
no, that game was fun. That definitely was something to enjoy. And then I think recently they just released a VR version of the game.
Oh, wild. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same game. I don't think it is. Um, because it was like Rise of the Ghost Lord or something like that. Some weird subtitle. But it gives you the ability to go out there. Winston is the head of the Ghostbusters Corporation, so it kind of plays off the storyline from Afterlife. And you go out there, and now you have a VR version of you can either play as the Buster or you can play as the ghosts.
Oh, neat. Okay.
So you can go out there and enjoy fun that way as well. But yeah, no, Ghostbusters was another one. You're right. Like that shit when I was a kid, the library ghost scared the fuck out of me.
Oh, yeah.
And my favorite line still comes from that library scene when they're first like getting into it and trying to figure out how to catch the ghost. They don't even have a proton pack or a trap yet. They just have the PKE meter. They're running around, and then Venkman looks at him and goes, "All right, what do we do next?" And they essentially just like bum rush the ghost. But right before that, when they come across the library ghost, Dan Aykroyd's character of Ray Stans says, wait, listen. You smell that? It's such a weird line, and the way he delivers it,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's one of the standout ones for me whenever it came to any Ghostbusters line. I was like, okay. Ray is he's a scientist, but he's a little, off his rocker, but it's kind of like Dan Aykroyd, to be honest. So just have fun with it. But
Well, it was always like Dan Aykroyd was like he had like the childlike curiosity and he was like the heart and soul of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And Egon was the brains and what's his face? Bill Murray was the mouth.
Yes, and it worked
And then
very well.
Winston was the common sense when they bring him in because the other guys, they're all PhDs and kind of like a little bit like out there. But Winston's the regular guy who's like, I just need a job. And at one point in time, like when they're talking about like, there's that great line when they're driving, when Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson are driving somewhere, and he's talking about like biblical stuff and about like the dead rising, and Winston just looks at him and is like, yeah, that's why we've been so busy lately. And Dan Aykroyd's like, holy shit, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, that first one was fucking amazing. And again,
Hmm.
looking back at it, just how crazy the production for it was, and the other actors that were going to be in the film, like John Candy, Eddie Murphy, and John Belushi, were all apparently like tapped at one point to be some of the different Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
But for whatever reasons, they all either they turned it down, or they just couldn't, meet up with their schedules.
Hmm.
And you got what you got. But it ends up being fucking amazing. So it's like one of those cult classics, and just I don't know. It's the fact that that has endured for so long, and that Dan Aykroyd's never stopped flying the flag for it and saying, ghosts and spiritualism and everything else. And the fact that if you ever look into Dan Aykroyd's family, apparently there is a lot of work with the occult.
Hmm.
So even that is another, little weird aspect. Dan Aykroyd's love of aliens and conspiracy theories and everything else. So he also has stories pertaining to that. But if you can hunt down an early version of Ghostbusters, it's a weird, wacky script that does not resemble anything of what the final movie came out to be.
Oh, is that the one with the time travel and the visors and the weird wands and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, yes, it was a weird,
Yeah, yeah.
weird story that had to go through a lot of different filters before it finally became the Ghostbusters that we know and love today.
Hmm.
But it's just like, oh wow, like some stories can be good, but some stories have to be refined a little bit before they get, put in front of an audience, and that was one of the cases for this. But the fact that it still exists and has pushed on that we're going to be getting another one at the end of this month. I mean, that's cool. I mean, look, Hollywood is trading on nostalgia at this point. If they can bring something back and say, hey, you remember this when you were a kid, or remember this when you were growing up? You want to give us some money to go watch a bit of your childhood?
Hmm.
Cool, I guess. But a lot of people complain saying that, oh, we need something new, we need something fresh. Why do we keep going back to these old IPs? Look, they go back to the old IPs because they're tried and true for the most part.
Hmm.
Unless you drop the ball, a Ghostbusters movie can be a big hit. We've seen it. It can also be a dud. We've seen that one as well with the Kristen Wiig and Melissa McCarthy one, unfortunately. I liked Chris Hemsworth in that film as well. He played, his comedy bits were actually silly as him as the dumb blonde.
Yeah, that was pretty funny as him as just a clueless dumbass was actually kind of amusing.
Yeah, to have the, 180 turnaround from him being Thor, where he's, big and rippling muscles and majestic and everything else, to have him just be a complete moron. I appreciated that. And you also got to see he has the comedic chops for that kind of thing. So I was like, all right, that works out. But now with a bunch of other different things, like we talked about The Crow recently. That's another one that's
Uh-huh.
coming out real soon. And we don't know how that one's going to turn out yet. There's a few months before that one gets released. But again, people are going off of nostalgia. It's an old IP at this point, coming up on 30 years, right?
Yeah, May is 30 years.
Thank you. I blanked for a second. Yeah, we oh my god. Yeah, we talked about the whole idea that it's been around for quite a bit, and the off anniversary year. This is the one of the milestones. But everybody's like has their opinions on it. So is it going to be a successful return to the IP well? Gotta wait and see. Or,
Hmm.
do you want something new? Do you want something that you haven't seen before and risk not finding your audience with, a new IP? I don't know. That's all for the movie makers, the filmmakers, the story writers, and the people who write the checks.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it's we vote with our dollars and we decide whether we want to support it, see it again, or own it on DVD or digital when it comes out. Video on demand, I guess now is the big thing. But I don't know. It's odd, and I'm kind of looking forward to. I'm a fan if the story is good enough. I'm a fan if they find the right way to continue the storyline. Like I mentioned with Star Wars. Star Wars has a history now of films, TV, cartoons, and all that stuff. Whether they start up the novelizations again and they find a new canon to expand upon, whatever the case is. The newer Star Wars film starring Daisy Ridley as Rey Skywalker and building the Jedi Temple, like I'm in. Like from there, I'm excited to see that story expand further. Ghostbusters, just to see the original guard teaming up with the kids and the new characters that are coming in. They're back in New York. Ghostbusters New York. What can't you love about that? So stuff like that, I'm definitely I want to see more of. But I know the people out there saying, "Oh, it's so repetitive, the same thing, crap all over again." Well, all right, there is plenty of content out there. Stop yucking somebody else's yum. If you don't want to see that, shut the fuck up. Go find something you do like.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's. I like to say it's simple as that, but sometimes it's not. And let's face it, it's the naysayers will have something very loud to say about some things. So.
Yeah. I don't know.
Oh, fuck. Well, I apologize for the whole Star Wars thing in the beginning. I didn't realize that was going to be a large portion of the show this week.
I'm just letting you go, man.
No, it's fine.
You pilot the ship, man.
Well, I just, when I first thought about it, I'm like, oh, you know what? I can share this little fun thing that happened at home and think about, all the fun, exciting times. Again, because it reminded me of being a kid. But then the fact that I looked over at the recorder, I'm like, oh shit, like a half hour has passed and we're talking about Star Wars still. Fuck. What the fuck am I doing? Oh, good Lord. Well, I hope some of you out there enjoyed that one. We'll see how that one turns out. Let me know through your emails and your comments. Let's see. I think we're just about there. How do you feel?
I'm ready for bed.
Well, I'll tell you what. Some of our recent ones have gone a little bit longer, so I think we can cut right about here. Why not? Let's go have our relaxing evenings and then enjoy because tomorrow's Friday. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan to me there, fella.
If you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez.
I'm Doug.
And we are the Rabblecast.